This is Spencer Marzouk, CEO of ThinkLP, a multi-million-dollar company transforming how businesses think about loss prevention. A little over a decade ago, Spencer hit rock bottom. And I don't mean the type of rock bottom where things are just tough. I mean the soul-crushing, I have nothing left to give, what's the point of life, rock bottom. 2 weeks into his freshman year, his mother lost a long battle with cancer. A year later, his friend and roommate was killed as a passenger in a drunk driving accident. Those moments should have broken him, but they didn't. Today, Spencer holds an MBA from Harvard, reshaped corporate strategy at Tupperware, launched programs like the Dream Initiative for underserved teens out of Alabama, and now leads a tech company trusted by some of the biggest names in retail across the globe. How? He built his life on 3 principles: shift your mindset, pour into others, and lead with purpose. Spencer's story isn't just inspiring, it's a blueprint. And today I'm sharing the unconventional path he took to success and the lessons he used to turn setbacks into opportunities so you can do the same. I'm Chris Ford, and this is Differentiate. Spencer Marzouk, welcome to the show.
Great to be here, Chris. Honored.
So before we get started, let's create a quick baseline. You're running a SaaS company that for you is all built upon a foundation of purpose. And I've heard you say that ThinkLP is completely changing the game for retailers. But let's take a quick step back for anybody that may be new to you or your work. For those that don't know you yet, who is Spencer Marzouk and what is ThinkLP all about?
Yeah. So first of all, ThinkLP is a software company that is a loss intelligence platform. And we serve some of the largest organizations in the world, primarily retailers, as they streamline their operations around safety and their operations around loss prevention, which is like stolen products. And we think of our purpose in the world is helping these organizations protect people and profits. I think one thing that's really unique about our customer base is we serve retail is the largest private sector employer in the world. It's the focal point of GDP growth in many ways in our economy here in the United States. No better time than the holiday season to kind of see that. And so we see a huge part of why we exist is we empower these teams to stay open and keep people safe. And one core aspect of that actually is just generally keeping stores open in the most vulnerable communities. When there's ongoing theft and when there's ongoing safety issues, it's hard to stay open. And so these typically happen in the most underserved communities in the United States. And our big part of our job is to ensure that mothers in these communities can have access to their baby formula, to have access to diapers with stores open, that can have access to prescriptions, that can have access to really the daily goods that any one of us need to live. And so we find that we take that personal and we dive in with our companies, specifically their safety executives, their CFOs, to make sure that they've got the tools they need to stay open and accessible to every corner of the world.
That's fascinating. It's a really big mission, and it's clear to me that ThinkLP is rooted in more than just operational metrics and KPIs. And as you were talking, it struck me that the word purpose can at times be such a buzzword, but it feels different when it's rooted in something real. Let's unpack that a little bit more. When people say purpose, it can feel overused. It can feel vague. Simon Sinek may say it's your why. Some people may use the ikigai, which is the intersection of what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can get paid for. But for you, what does it actually mean? How do you define the word purpose?
I think purpose is the definitive difference that you're trying to make in the world. And for me, I discovered this through lots of ups and downs. It was really around sports that I found joy of empowering people to realize their full potential. And I think everybody's got superpowers and it's just about unlocking that. I think it came best from Aristotle. Aristotle, to paraphrase him, said something along the lines of, where your talents and the needs of the world meet, therein lies your purpose. And so for me, I think of your talents are the things that give you energy. One thing that I think about when kind of start in finding purpose is I really, at a young age, I think I reflected on what gives me energy and what drains me. And I don't think enough people do that. We do this exercise at ThinkLP. We have everybody in the company go through and list out energy drainers and energy gainers. When they're really trying to decide on a new role or they're trying to figure out a next step in their growth journey, what are the things that give you energy and what are the things that drain you? And, I think Aristotle, what he says there, with your talents and the needs of the world meet, it's like, what are those things that give you energy and the needs of the world where they intersect? Therein lies your purpose. There lies your vocation.
That's really good. I love that. I especially love how you connected purpose to energy. I think that's a really practical lens to look at things through, especially for leaders. But your path to finding this wasn't exactly straightforward. Let's go back to where it all started. You grew up in a household with two very different cultures and two extremely different religions. How did that upbringing and those experiences start to shape how you look at the world today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in a multicultural, a multi-religion household. My dad was raised in Cairo, Egypt, and my mom was raised Mormon in Salt Lake City, Utah. And so the backgrounds, both the kind of the religious cultural upbringings, going to be more polar opposite in some ways. And that household was, I look back on it and I really appreciate it because it provided me a ton of different perspective. My parents were very open to different faiths and learning about different faiths. They were very open to travel. One thing, my dad worked for Delta, so we flew for free, which was a great experience growing up. And so that exposure element combined with like the perspectives of their cultural backgrounds, and it made for like a unique just household, and it also made for a unique perspective on the world. Part of the job too that my dad had was we moved about every 5 years across the US, just the nature of his job. And so, we were living in different parts of the country. I was in the Northeast, the Midwest. Obviously, me living in North Carolina in the South. And the combination of seeing America in different parts of the country combined with the cultural aspect of my household also added to that perspective, which really just empowered me to just be open and have conversations with people, and empowered me a little bit to be curious about people and just ask questions, get to know their backgrounds. I mean, this. So we were a family that, despite those religious differences, that we went to a Methodist church together in North Carolina and made great community with everybody. And so for me, that was like all I knew. And so whenever I would find myself in environments that were very different to that, where maybe it was like a closed environment that only knew one world, it made me curious, and it actually allowed me, I think, this ability to, in some way, try to put myself into the shoes of others, which is at its core an incredible leadership tool. Because if you could put yourself in the shoes of others, you can find common ground, and it's always on common ground where conversations open up and perspectives lead to innovation. They lead to ideas, they lead to relationships. And so I think I was like, from the household and being this environment of those super multicultural and totally opposite upbringings from my parents' eyes, it gave me a little bit of leadership skill that unbeknownst to me, that I didn't know would come into play later in life.
Yeah, and for somebody that has known you for a long time, I think curiosity is a good way to sum it up. And that really comes through and actually makes me think of a story that you've shared before, but many people probably haven't heard or don't know. You did travel around the world, you had new experiences, you saw new places, and you also met new people, but not just any people. People like Muhammad Ali. What happened, and how did it shape your perspective on life and on leadership as a whole?
We lived in South Bend, Indiana for a period of my life. It's in northern Indiana, so it's close to Michigan. And fun fact that I think a lot of people didn't know about Ali was he lived in Berrien Springs, Michigan for most of his life. And he actually lived in Al Capone's old house. So he'd fly into the South Bend airport, and my dad was the manager of Delta at the South Bend airport. And he took up a liking to my dad. One reason was obviously the cultural aspect, my dad being Muslim from the Middle East and Muhammad Ali being a Muslim. And he found it fascinating, kind of like our family dynamics, as I described. And he loved my dad. He just became a fan of him while he was traveling. And one day, Muhammad Ali's bag went missing and showed up a day later. And so Muhammad and his assistant, they said, the only person we want to deliver this bag is Tom, my dad, and his family. And so I was like 8 years old and I was outside playing basketball all dirty with some friends in the driveway. And it was like 4:30 p.m. And I just remember my mom coming outside. Spencer, get on here, get dressed, get cleaned up. We're going to see the champ. And I was like, what are we talking about here? I'm in the middle of a basketball game with some friends. But yeah, long story short, we ended up as a family on a whim, driving to Muhammad Ali's house, delivering a bag. And my sister was a baby at the time. And Muhammad Ali was just incredible and how he embraced her, embraced our family, took photos. And I'll never forget going there, him whispering in my ear, I'm the champ, you're the chump. And it was just an incredible experience. And just like we just talked about curiosity and getting to know different people and their perspectives. And I think I was young, but that experience made me really have an appetite for learning about civil rights and getting curious about it. And later in life, that took me down a path for my first job in Alabama. And so, there you go. That's a common full circle. But that's what I remember about Ali, man, was being told I'm the champ, you're the chump, and having a great photo op and experience I'll never forget.
Oh, no way. That is so cool. And this is about the time that he had Parkinson's, correct?
So one thing about Muhammad was no matter where he was, he wanted you to feel special, no matter who you were. I think that's why he made him so special, actually, around the world. And when he was like boarding a plane, every flight was delayed because he'd sign autographs of everybody and he wanted to shake everybody's hand and you couldn't stop him. And so for us at his house, we got this private autograph session and he had this stack of pictures of him and he would sign them. But with Parkinson's, he was shaky. And if he'd screw up an autograph, he would set it aside and restart. And this was at a time in his life when his Parkinson's was really, really noticeable. And he took his time to make sure that each one of us got a perfectly autographed picture. He didn't want that signature to be off by a small piece because of his Parkinson's. And so I just remember him distinctly taking his time, going through like 5 photos just for me. And then, finally getting that perfect one and then doing that to my mom and my dad and my sister.
That is such an incredible story. And I can only imagine meeting somebody like that at 8 years old. For me, I was a big North Carolina Chapel Hill fan growing up, loved their basketball team. For me, that would be the equivalent of meeting somebody like Vince Carter at the time or Ed Cota, maybe Joseph Forte. Some names that you probably don't know, especially if you don't live in North Carolina, but some people that I really, really loved and looked up to at the time. Now, I know you were young, but do you think there was anything about that experience that started to form the way that you look at life, or did it imprint on you in any way?
You know what? Looking back on it, I'm not surprised. And you would appreciate this as an athlete too, right? Like we played basketball together growing up, is the insane attention to detail that it takes for greatness. And I look back on that moment, I'm like, it makes sense. Ali knew no other way but perfection. He knew no other way but attention to detail. And so for me, I just these little moments, right? That's something like I took with me. And as I grew up over time and got to learn what makes greatness by studying different athletes and different professionals, is that Ali skill, which is I'm going to do this perfect until I get it right. He's a perfectionist.
You mentioned the words perfection. You mentioned the words attention to detail. For somebody that knows you really well, I think that summarizes you to a T. You were tenacious on the basketball court. Somebody that you hated to practice against, but loved that they were on your team when that game came around on a Thursday night. Sort of like a Draymond Green for the Golden State Warriors. You always need somebody like that, right? But you were a perfectionist and you had that attention to detail. And I think that paid off in the fact that you got offers to go play college ball in the Northeast. You ended up going up to New Hampshire at New England College. But before your college career ever started, tragedy struck. What happened?
I was a sophomore in high school when I moved to North Carolina and I met you. And that's a hard thing to do, move in high school. And so when I got to North Carolina, my family was trying to move and it was like a weird 8-month period where half the family was in Maine, where we were moving from, and half the family was in North Carolina. And then we finally got settled into our house in North Carolina and I was a junior. My mom had just a backache, normal backache. didn't think anything of it, and it just kind of got intense. And so she went to the doctor, and lo and behold, she had stage 4 colon cancer that had been manifesting for 10 years. She was about 10 years younger than when you're supposed to go in for early detection, or and that at that time was early detection was in your 50s. And so that hit the family hard. And I then went throughout my entire high school career, candidly, just like, wanted to be there for my sister, wanted to be there for my family, and not knowing if what tomorrow would bring. And that was really difficult. Sports was an outlet. Great friends and community like yourself are still this day like an unbelievable support system. And I faced the decision where when I was in the recruiting process, and like I had hoop dreams, I wanted to play basketball. I wanted to play D3 hoops because that was where I have my talents and the needs of the world met. And I went to my mom came on a recruiting trip. She went on one recruiting trip, and that was to New England College. And I just remember her interacting with the coach, and there's a sense of comfort to that. And so I contemplated going to college at all, to be honest. It was at this stage where I was afraid to leave home because of the situation. I thought about staying in state, and I went to New England College, was there for about a week. And my dad just called me and was like, you got to come home. Your mom's not doing well at all. So I flew back home to North Carolina, and my mom passed away a few days after that. And I was home for, I think, about 8 weeks. So my college career started in a very unconventional way, right? Usually you're going there to school, you're meeting new friends, you're having a great time. I barely started. I contemplated even going to school at that point. I should take a year off or 2 years off or something. But, the big fear for me was my family, my sister, who was 12 at the time. And at the same time, figuring out next steps for me. And like, if I really wanted to stay true to the path that I set out on to play ball. And I decided to stick it out. Like, I just decided that it was what my mom wanted, is that like she would want me to go and fulfill my dream and my goal. And so I ended up going back to school, and the season kicked off almost immediately as I landed back in campus. And that was how I started my college career.
Oh man. And I remember being somebody that was part of your life at the time, going through that with you, how traumatic of an experience that was, especially with the family dynamics, you being away at school, and you're supposed to be in a season of life that's supposed to be one of the happiest times of your life, now is getting turned on its head. And you had thoughts of, do I even want to continue? And I think that's a really common place that people can find themselves in. Life is hard. Life is tough. And I think we all find ourselves at a crossroads at some point in our life where we're saying, is it even worth it anymore? And you have to make a decision. Do I go left? Do I go right? Do I quit? Or do I persevere? And for you, you persevered. But I'm curious, and I'm sure a lot of people out there want to know, what did those first days or weeks look like for you? How did you get back up, dust yourself off, and say, you know what, I can do this?
First of all, it was like numbness, right? And by the way, I think the way grieving, you're always grieving. Like, I think it's a continuous process. It takes, it's a lifetime, right? And at some point, we're all going to lose someone close to us. That's how life works. And we're all going to grieve, and it's going to be a continuous process. And in that immediate moment, there's a numbness to it. I had a great leader in my life who was he ran the Point Guard College, which is a nationally acclaimed basketball camp across the country, trains young people all the way up to NBA and pro level. And his name is Monel Watson. I'm friends with him to this day. And he said, can't always control your circumstances, but you can certainly control how you respond to them. And how you respond to circumstances is what really defines people. And so despite my emotions and numbness, I just really kept focused on how can I respond? And then how can I respond in a way that would make my mother proud, would honestly make Chris, friends like you, proud. And that's how I focused on it, was that mentality of, you cannot control your circumstances, but you can always control how you respond to them. It's a skill. The term that I've heard it described as is a fake word, but it's called unruffleability. And it's the ability to not be ruffled and to really see the forest through the trees and see through temporary pain and the long-term outlook. And by the way, I recognize I was a freshman in college. That's so easier said than done. You're just at a different maturity level. Everybody is at that stage. But for whatever reason, I was around great people, specifically Mono in this case, who introduced this concept of unruffability and being able to not necessarily be able to dictate every circumstance, but definitely being able to dictate how you respond to them.
So now we're a little bit more than a decade removed from you losing your mother. If she were here today, what do you think she would say? Not just about what you built or what you're doing, but more so the man that you've become.
Man, that's a tough question. First of all, I think she'd be proud. I like to think that she would say, like, you're not done. You got a long ways to go, as any mother would, right? I hope to think that she'd be proud, and yeah, something I think about for sure every day, man.
Yeah, she would definitely be proud. And I think one thing that she would absolutely love is your resiliency. And resiliency really seems to define so much of your story. You lost your mother, you get back to campus, the basketball season kicks off as soon as you get back. You're finally finding your footing, you're getting things back to some sense of normalcy. Then tragedy strikes again. What happens?
So after I get through my freshman year, I make some great friends. I start to fall into my rhythm in school. And one of my friends was a guy named Dana Poole, myself, him, some friends from New England College. We had a suite that we shared together in one of the dorm buildings. And unfortunately, like, one night, kind of tragedy hit, and Dana got in a car accident and lost his life on campus at New England College. It was like in the blink of an eye, all of a sudden he's gone, and happening like right before our own eyes in terms of on our campus and in our community. And so it was an incredibly difficult experience, and we were juniors and I think juniors in college at this time. And so, over the course of this period, I think between the period of when I was a sophomore in high school to when I was a junior in college, I lost both my grandmothers, my mom, and a good friend in a matter of about a 5-year time frame before the age of 21.
Man, does it almost feel like the world is testing you at that point?
It feels like, yeah. I mean, at that point, it almost feels like you go through stages. I think like one of them was the like, this can't be real. Then like, you got to be kidding me, and the why, almost like the anger phase. And again, at that point, for me, I realized, look, you can't always control your circumstances, but you can always dictate how you respond. Going back to that, and you know, for me, I just kind of felt like at that point, I need to show up a little bit for my friends. I need to show up for the school at that time, and honestly for the loved ones that were all tragically impacted by this. But man, it was hard. I will say this, Chris. I think these are like the most formative years of people's lives. That high school phase and that college phase, and they're usually combined with fun and people discovering who they are. In my case, it was certainly challenging, and it just forced me to face situations that required emotional and mental toughness that I think allowed me to fortify myself in the long term. Well, in the moment, didn't feel great.
So, for somebody listening that feels like right now they're carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders, maybe it is that they have lost somebody and they're trying to find their way back. Maybe they are building a business and they have failed over and over and over again, and they're trying to figure out, is this even worth it for me? Or maybe they're climbing the corporate ladder and they're not getting the promotions that they want. What do you say to that person?
I would say someone out there has always had it worse. There is someone out there who's had it worse, who's found a way. And that is truth. I think Winston Churchill said a great thing, and that is greatness is in being able to fail and fail and fail continuously without losing passion or excitement. And I'm paraphrasing that. And I think that the reality of that is like this mentality that you have to know that despite this being hard, there is someone out there who's had it more difficult than you. And, I think about this in terms of you doing a startup or you trying to reach a sales target. I can promise you this, there's been something harder that's been a goal that's been accomplished in harder circumstances. And if you just like are able to have that like mentality, what it does is it puts you in a frame of thinking that gives you not only ownership, but like a an unbelievable understanding of, I don't want to say like no excuses, but like that you can power forward. And so, that would be my advice to everybody. It'll serve you well. Serve me well.
And what I love about your story, I mean, I love everything about it, the highs, the lows, everything in between, but I love that although you were knocked down twice, you felt like you were kicked in the teeth, you bounced back and you bounced back stronger than you were before. And you started to take your purpose and apply it to every step that you took moving forward. How?
Yeah. So my mom, when she was young, she was very involved in just like nonprofit space in terms of volunteering. And she worked for the YMCA for some time. One of her YMCA jobs was opening up YMCAs in Israel and Gaza. And so as a young person, she was like very humanitarian driven in that regard. And then the combination of really getting curious about Muhammad Ali and that experience, the combination really drove me to be curious about creating opportunities for people. How do you build equality in areas that are disadvantaged? And then really learning about like the journey of civil rights. And so it just got me really curious. And that combined with like the tragedy and experiences I had in college and high school, I decided that I'm not going to like jump into this business thing right away. What I'm going to do is I want to do something that will dedicate an act to my mother and be centered around being a public servant. And so I decided that I wasn't going to take a job in the corporate world, which I had an offer for, but that I was going to become a teacher and do the Teach for America program in rural Alabama, in the center of the civil rights movement, the heart of it all, where Dr. King really started out of Montgomery. And so I ended up going to Alabama, teaching eighth grade math in Lowndes County, Alabama, which was one of the poorest counties in the United States at the time. Transformative experience, completely changed my life.
Teaching in general is challenging, but teaching in an underserved community with kids that already feel like the cards are stacked against them, I mean, what an undertaking. Is there a moment that sticks out to you that where you're like, this is why I'm here?
Man, that's a great question. There's so many. One of them comes from a student. Her name is Kiara Aaron, who she just like embodied this go get spirit. She had a ton of distractions and challenges and circumstances just like all around her. And Kiara found a way to persevere through all of that. She was very bright. And we're talking like, a school district that just naturally was not provided the means to succeed, let alone the infrastructure, let alone kind of the system that it needed to kind of close those gaps, despite the great people there working tirelessly on the ground. And so, Kiara, she worked her tail off, and fast forward 40 years, there's a picture of Kiara she sends me. She goes, "Thank you, Mr. Marzouk and all my teachers." And she had gotten close to near $1 million in scholarships. And she had like a picture of her, like, it almost looked like signing day pictures, right? When you see athletes, she had these letters of scholarships. I remember getting that picture and crying. That's like, of course, the one thing that stands out to me. But I'll also say there was numerous students like myself that I could relate to in terms of a loss of a loved one. One of my students had his family killed in a car accident. I had, just challenges, adverse circumstances. And so there's a level of like, despite being so, an outsider, finding a way to connect with students certainly came from tragedy in some degree.
Now you're teaching in rural Alabama. You take the passion that you have for teaching these kids and the impact that you see on their lives, and you decide to go start a nonprofit. At the time, it's called Mission Impossible, now called the Dream Initiative, and you guys have done some absolutely remarkable things. I have some numbers in front of me, but I'm hoping if you could take us through the numbers. What is the impact that you've had on these kids down in rural Alabama?
So the Dream Initiative, by the way, a program that helps create exposure experiences and college and career prep for students in underserved communities, primarily in Alabama. It's been around now for 10 years. it's grown bigger and greater than I could ever imagine because of the great network of volunteers and people who we've brought into the organization that have built it up bigger than I could ever imagine. But I think over the course of the years, we're close now to over 1,000 students, and about 90% have gone on to become first generation college students. But also, I think the more important part of that is a big portion of those that have not gone on to college were able to find what they love to do and their vocation. And so some of the students have gone through the Dream Initiative, have gone to become successful trades folks that are actually running their own businesses now and never went to college. And, I think that's a profound thing. If I talk about purpose, and, doing what you love to do, we often characterize success or in like college and going to college and having a 4-year degree, but we have thousands of high skilled, high paid jobs in the United States. And I think, yes, we have an education problem. Yes, we have a labor problem, but we also have a really bad marketing problem that we somehow have said, like, that is not a path. And it is, I can tell you right now, later in life, as someone who's now working on the investment side of stuff and as a leader of an organization and has seen, I think over the course of the last 10 years, you might see more plumbers, welders, technicians become multimillionaires as founding their own businesses than ever before. And so I can't emphasize enough how there's such a path there. And so I say that because the Dream Initiative, that's one thing we've really evolved with over time is we measure in that stat on college, first generation college students. But like for us, it's even more about how are we able to create a sustainable path for students and by unlocking what they love to do. I'll tell you what, there's definitely a path to success and a career there. And we're really excited about seeing what we can do in the future, trying to expand upon college and paths that are not a 4-year degree.
Man, that is so good. And what I love about doing the right thing or making an impact in the world anywhere is that you never know who is watching. You go from teaching algebra in rural Alabama to scaling a company like Tupperware globally, living in Germany. What a leap. What a leap. How does something like that happen?
So first of all, that is such a great lesson, something I took with me forever, and I still instill with folks today, is you just never know who's watching. So for me, I was a teacher in Alabama. I was just trying to provide really an exposure experience for my students. That many of them had not traveled, and I just wanted them to see different career paths. I wanted them to see how people who look like them, who come from their circumstances, have different career paths. And so really did a great job of connecting them to, leaders, not just in Alabama, but beyond. And so I wrote some emails, and I wrote an email to, ironically, a woman by the name of Mara Hayes, who is an executive at Disney and operates at the time she was operating the Times Square studios here in New York City, which hosts Good Morning America. So she loved what we were doing. We were on the set of the show. The students got to see what it was like to work in media and to work in TV. And she really took it upon herself to embrace the students. And after we were on the show, one day, Mara reached out to me and said, somebody's interested in speaking with you. And they're the chairman of the Boys and Girls Club of America, but they're also the CEO of Tupperware Brands Corporation. Name's Rick Goings. And so she said, would you mind if I give him your email? And I was like, sure. Rick sent me an email one day, and I was shocked. I didn't think he would reach out. So I got on a phone call with him, and long story short, he just kind of said, tell me what you're doing after Teach for America. Like, what do you want to do? And I said, I think I want to go to business school. And he told me, forget that. I'll buy you the books. You don't need to go to business school. And he said, why don't you come on down to Orlando to meet, that's where they're headquartered, to meet my executive team. So I ended up flying down to Orlando as a teacher, and I didn't know what to expect. I thought I was going there to like raise some money, and I showed up, and, unbeknownst to me, this was like a very intense job interview. And at the end of it, Rick and the team decided to create a position for me that was a management development role, and really just like the ability to like learn a rotational management development program. But in doing that, I got to work in different parts of the business, but most importantly, I got to be mentored by Rick for that period of time, that I was in that program. And so we'd sit in his office in Orlando. And I think it was just really a life-changing experience to learn from a leader who was changing lives in many ways in the private sector, but also in the nonprofit sector, and in some ways influencing on the public sector in a positive light when it came to terms of his involvement with Davos and the World Economic Forum. And it just opened my eyes to, I think, the person I want to become and someone I can look up to. I think a lot of young people sometimes they focus on like the job, the brand, or like what they'll be doing out of the gate, and they'll focus less on who they'll be doing it with and who they'll be learning from. For me, I didn't sit here and say like I hope to work at Tupperware, but that wasn't like my huge goal in life. It was more of I wanted to learn what it was like to be a leader like Rick. And from that, I embraced it, learned a lot about what it means to manage a company, what it means to manage different parts of a business, what it means to actually empower people, and what it means to, from a global perspective. Tupperware is a company that, is globally recognized. At the time, they were in over 100 countries. More recently, they just went through a large restructuring and kind of a restart phase, but they've been, they're still global. They've kind of touched almost every corner of the continent in some degree. Every corner of the world in some degree. So that global perspective as well was a huge learning experience and opportunity.
You said before that, in your opinion, leadership can be one of the most noble professions. What do you think separates forgettable managers from truly life-changing leaders?
If I had to distill and simplify my job down to anything, it is my job, my role at ThinkLP is creating an operating landscape that is a growth environment. I am the facilitator of a growth environment that develops the best, recruits the best, retains the best, and empowers people to become the best version of themselves. And what's interesting, and I say that too about like the whole management side, is if it's done right, your manager, your boss will be the most life-changing figure in your life. And what my job is to not only be that of myself for my people, but it is to empower my leadership team and the entire organization, whoever's leading, to be the best version of a leader that they possibly can. Because if we all focus on that, if we build each other up, the business is going to build itself. And that's what I've done, or kind of what I see my role as at ThinkLP, simply put, is a facilitator of creating an operating landscape that is a growth environment. And one thing that we really do at ThinkLP is, we live by, there's 8 philosophies that we live by. We call them ThinkLosophies. And these are really, they're almost like values, but we think about them as philosophies because we want people to, if they, hey, like this is a philosophy you can apply to your everyday life to go and foster a growth environment. And so, for us, that's make a difference. It's believing big and starting small. It's thinking like one team. It's having customers as partners, really being a great partner to them. It's inspiring belonging. It's following through. It's that element of that unruffability that I described. And it's the last one that we say is commit to your best, and us all just becoming the best versions of us. And, a part of the growth environment, what's interesting is that I think the people that have grown, that you think about growth, you think about people who develop and they grow, right? We spent last week 3 or 4 days as a whole company talking about a growth environment, from our leaders, our managers, all of the entire company, and outline like what that looks like. And one of the things we said was like, look, the people who grow, they tend to be happy. Growth is happiness. And so whether that's personal growth, small achievements over time. And so for us, we really focus on developing that. And like, that's what I think my role is as a manager and as a leader.
You use the word inspiration. You are an absolute inspiration to me. You always have been, you always will be. You are somebody that is continuing to grow, do great things, and you're pushing me to be better in every sense of the word. So for that, I say thank you. Now, before we wrap, tell everybody, what's one thing that you're working on? What are you excited about? What's next for Spencer Marzouk and ThinkLP?
Man, biggest thing I'm working on is, like I mentioned, I'm trying to build a great team and a great organization that's able to really empower the world in many ways when it comes to these teams that keep us safe, that keep doors open, that keep food on shelves. And one thing that we're looking to do is take it to the next level in terms of innovation. And so if you haven't heard of us yet, our goal is that you'll hear of us in the near future. We're a growing company. We've almost doubled our business in 2 years, and we're just getting started. And so, we're looking forward to being able to work and continue to work with some of the largest employers in the world as they build safe environments and they're able to continue to do what they do best, which is innovate and provide opportunities for people and access for people, rather that be goods, services, et cetera. So that's our biggest thing that we're working on. And, for me, biggest thing, like I said, is I'm just trying to be the best version of myself every single day. I'm trying to be better than Spencer yesterday, day by day.
I love it, man. I absolutely love it. Well, thank you again for being on. It was an absolute honor. I had a blast. I hope you did as well. For anybody that is still here with us, thank you for listening in. Thank you for the support. The only way that we can have conversations with remarkable people like Spencer is if you continue to tune in and support the show. I hope you enjoyed the episode. That is one story that is differentiated. I'm Chris. This has been differentiated. We'll see you next time. Peace.
You're the best, Chris.